Please welcome your host, MMA Global CEO, Greg Stuart.
I would contend that marketing is potentially where the medical profession was in the mid-1800s. When they thought the draining of blood was good for health, was good for disease removal. The practice was called bloodletting. It was the prevailing medical practice since the time of Greek and Romans. Now, as you might suspect, the only challenge to this approach is that it was killing people. In fact, America's first president died of bloodletting. Well, we have a little clicker issue to start. AV, if I could get a slide clicker. Go back, please. Thank you. So America's first president, George Washington, died of bloodletting. They drained 40% of his blood because they thought it would make him better, and obviously that didn't happen. King Charles in the 1600s died, and it's alleged that Mozart, thank you, also died of bloodletting. Now, the theory was based on the four humors, right? That there were four fluids within the body, and they had whole thematic and theoretical practice and documentation around how they all needed to be in balance. The only unfortunate part was, as I said, it was killing people. It theoretically made sense, but it was killing people. I'd like to suggest that marketing has some irrational thinking in it. That there are things that sound good, that sound right, that theoretically make sense, and yet they are fundamentally, foundationally wrong. So a number of years ago, when I was a young media pup in the agency business, I went to my media director, who was at that time probably 30 years my senior, and I asked him a very practical question in the work I was doing on behalf of planning media for Procter & Gamble. I said, why do we put 2 commercials in primetime television a week? And I'll never forget, he puffed out his chest to me and he said, because based on my experience, that's what it takes to drive the business. I knew he was lying. I could just tell he had no idea what he was talking about. But he had a theory, and he had seniority, and he made the claim, and people, I guess, nodded their heads and said, okay. Now, what's interesting about that is that's what led me to actually support the development of multi-touch attribution in 2001, 2002, and beyond. I knew there was a better approach to measuring marketing, and it was that fundamental gnawing feeling in my stomach that said things are wrong, that we need to be better than this, that drove me to take the action to bring a new technique for measurement, which was really at that time supporting internet as a development, if you remember the timing. Now, as a result of that, I got the opportunity to co-author a book. It's called What Sticks? I think you can get it for a penny now on eBay if you'd like to. If you don't know about books, they have a very standard format and form that they use. And that form is, in essence, that you write 234 pages. That's the magic number. And the first chapter is on the problem. And chapters 7 to 9 are about the solution. Now, my co-author, Rex Briggs, and I knew we had a problem when the first chapter had topped out at 165 pages on the problems alone. We knew we needed to start to rethink. We ended up redoing the book, trying to summarize the problems, of which there were many, and then focus more on the solutions at the time. Now, that's even not the most disappointing news that I have today. My disappointing news to share with you today, as was covered by Ad Age earlier last week, is that we have been working on market and organizational work, some of you know, and as a result of that, we have a Net Promoter Score for marketing departments. You know, and you know how Net Promoter Score works. If you were to recommend, or would you recommend to a friend or colleague to work in your marketing department? The Net Promoter Score for the marketing department, it's a complicated number, so let me hold to that. And it doesn't tell us everything we need to know, so let's hold to that, is a negative 2%. That's what we think. I have children. I love the business of marketing. I love the people I get to work with. I love the challenges of the problem. I love everything we do. I've been in this business for over 3 decades, and I did not recommend to my children to go into marketing. Feels funny to me. Feels like somehow I'm missing the point of it. So let's take a look at some of marketing's quickly bloodletting dynamics, right? This is how most of us feel. What have you done for me lately, right? That's the pressure of it. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on the Spencer Stuart data because I think it gets overquoted and somewhat misrepresented. But we talk a lot about tenure. We know that there's a foundational issue within it. We also know that, well, actually, I'll explain it to this way. I had a meeting a number of years ago with a series of CMOs. In fact, I'll name the CMOs because none of these current ones were in their jobs there anymore, so I can kind of let them go nameless. And we asked them an opening question in this presentation. We said, or in a discussion we were going to have for an hour, closed door. It was a throwaway question. It's meant to be just 10 minutes. What's the role of marketing? What's the role of the CMO? We realized very quickly, 1 hour later, that nobody in that room agreed what the role of marketing was or what the role of the CMO. We all had different perspectives. So if we're not consistent with CFOs and CEOs and boards, how are they supposed to evaluate what we do and where we focus? One of my favorite of marketing's only sort of misrepresentations of bloodletting is the concept of reach-based planning. It's been pervasive. I happen to have seen in data, just came out a couple weeks ago from us, that is starting to reduce, which is good, but reach-based planning is fundamentally flawed. We have done a series of work around growth frameworks and have validated that that's wrong. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But again, it persists as the prevailing thinking about how we produce growth. And one of my favorites, which I'm not going to spend any time today because it takes a little bit too much time to explain, is duration-weighted impressions. DWI is the concept that says if we allow planning people to roll up the seconds of exposure to advertising, then they would better understand how to construct marketing plans. The challenge is there is zero relationship between time and performance or impact of marketing. Zero. There is no validation. And yet a group of people have gotten together and developed a theory that sounds conceptually right. And yet it is very, very wrong. Okay, but listen. You might be sitting there and go, huh, interesting. He opens up a marketing presentation and conference, possible, with the challenges that we have, right? But then that's the idea. That's the whole point of kind of the MMA. We need to face up to some of the issues that we have and work to fix them. And I'd like to suggest that there is hope on the way. There is work that the MMA is doing, and in essence, really the point and part of this conference is to bring that to the table. Here's one of my favorites. We asked a question, actually it was a CMO of a retailer who called me and said, Greg, is there a standard for marketing measurement? I'm a measurement expert. I was like, no, there isn't. Good news is we built one. It's called Quality Marketing Measurement Score. It will help you assess how you stand by channel. Is it the end all to be all? No, but it will be, hopefully, over time, the standard for what does quality look like. So that when I talk to the CFO or talk to the board, we say, this is what confidence in measurement looks like. This is what quality looks like. We as an industry agree, and we need to make sure that they understand that. Next one is I mentioned a little bit on reach-based planning, right? I don't like to just tear down what other people we think have gotten wrong. That's not necessarily the point of the MMA. What we do, though, is that we create new frameworks. We now have a framework called the movable middles. It basically says if you don't advertise to those who will very likely never buy your product, and you also don't have a necessity, and this is controversial, to advertise to those who will always buy your product, that you will see campaign performance go up 50 to 100%. If you have a plan for 50 to 100%, please share it with us, and we'll help make it also a popular standard in the world. That is the idea. That work is called Movable Middles Growth Framework, and you'll be seeing some of that on stage here. And this is my favorite one because this is literally 2 weeks old, and I showed it for the very first time to the board yesterday. I went into Google, our favorite search engine, and said, what is the value of brand? How many entries? Is there an answer? None of those tied it to financial performance, and yet there were 2,480,000,000 entries for that question alone. And yet we can't tell the CFO what the value of brand is. we can't articulate. We can talk about it in terms that they don't necessarily always care about, but they understand dollar cents bottom line, and we don't do a great job of that. And so as a result of that, as I said, yesterday we shared the first insight from our brand as performance research that basically says, and I could summarize this, there's more to it, it's more text on a page that I like here, that if you get $100 of sales today, we expect, and this is in a very, very brand, there's still a lot more work to do, another $140 of sales over time. We have an economic understanding of brand in a way we've never understood it. That is the work that the MMA is going after, so that we can take this face from sad, concerned, confused, dismayed, to happier. And there's so much more that MMA is doing. There's so much more that we're working on to really improve the dynamics of marketing today. In fact, if you wanted the agenda, send me a note, ask me for it. I'll send you everything that we're working on today to do that. So in sort of summarizing this up, I had the opportunity, I worked at Y&R for one part of my career, and I'd gotten to be friendly with the CFO of Y&R, the CEO of Y&R, a guy named Ed Vick. He had a great sign by his door I never forgot. In fact, it was situated right by his door that every time he walked out of the office, it's exactly what he saw. And that sign was, figure out what sucks and don't do it. Now, that's not a good mission statement. I've talked to the board. They said, no, you can't really use that. You should try something else. But you get the thesis, right? We want to figure out what doesn't work and make sure that you know what does work, and that we collectively as an industry are brought together to do that in a very powerful way. Maybe out of all of this, we develop our own Hippocratic Oath. If you've not read it, it basically says, we believe in the science and the understanding of those who have come before us. That's the idea of it. So listen, the good news is here. The good news is that MMA as an organization is going to work collectively with the many board members here and in 14 countries who operate around the world to try to bring you a sense of truth and understanding about marketing, about what really works, so that when you do talk to your board, you do talk to your CFO, and you do talk to the CEO, that you have a very good, comprehensive understanding and confidence in what we're doing. That is the whole point of Possible. That's why we did this, to help make the impossible super possible. I can't thank you enough for joining us here and joining us hopefully on our journey to really completely remake marketing and re-architect in the future. Thank you, everyone. Have a great show.
We might drink too much and say things we shouldn't say. Forgive and forget before we go to bed, and we're gonna be okay. Some people pretend it's not gonna end and then up and walk away, but that isn't me. I'm not gonna leave, I'm here to stay.